we talk about the Plaid for
I would like to, because I feel like I saw one in your new video, but it wasn't part of the video. It was like a teaser. You had it in front of you.
Yes, I got a video going up. I got a video going up on it soon, but I will reveal my thoughts.
Okay, I would love that.
And I listened to your podcast on it, so I already generally know yours, but I think it was insane. I think it's one of the craziest and coolest cars that I've ever experienced in my entire life. And I'm not like, I know that you're a big electric car fan. I'm not like the hugest Tesla guy. I love their products. I think to me, they feel a little bit, they're less like enthusiasty and emotional to me than a lot of cars, but I think they're great for a lot of people, and I recommend them to a lot of people. But I think Plaid is the first one that I like emotionally connected with. And I was telling people when I got home, like, I think I'll remember for as long as I live, like 3 major events in my career YouTubing about cars so far. One was like driving the Ferrari F40, which was like my first true vintage supercar, very special. Another was the first time I sat behind the wheel of Super Cruise, which was like the first of those driver assist technologies I had been in. It was on my 30th birthday, and the car was changing lanes, and I was like, the future is here. And I think number 3 will be pushing the throttle down in Plaid and feeling that acceleration. I was like astonished by how that felt. And you're just cruising around in this thing.
It is it's wild to me. A couple things. One, that's just going to be in the hands of regular people. Like I am a regular person. I was able to order one, and now I have it, and that is now a possible thing to happen. Wild. Yeah, I was so curious. So Tesla doesn't have a PR department, so I'm always curious how people's Tesla experiences happen. Did you met an owner, or did you get? Right. How did you even find one?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And the way that it always happens for me is, an owner reaches out, and it's always the best, because I actually prefer it like that for any car I can where I can get an owner is best, because there's no BS you have to deal with the manufacturer. You don't have to worry if they're going to cut off your flow for future cars, whatever. So I actually kind of like it with Tesla that it always just ends up being a guy. So yeah, it was an owner. A bunch of owners reached out to me. The car happened to come out like the first deliveries were like the day I went on a long vacation. And so by the time I got back, I was like already getting like conspiracy theory emails. Like, you haven't reviewed this because you're being paid by the other manufacturers not to review Teslas. And I was like, oh my God, guess I need to review one.
Yeah.
But so I went to an owner, and I just kind of, filmed the whole thing and then drove around in his.
I think it's probably I didn't expect to notice a difference, because I've driven a performance Model S for years, and I've driven Taycan and I've driven McLarens, and I've never expected to really feel a big difference in acceleration. I assumed it would always be incremental, and I think I was driving it back to the studio from picking it up, it was maybe a 20-something minute drive. And I was like, oh, I'm going to baby this thing. Like, I'm going to get it wrapped in a week. I don't want to do anything crazy. And then I got to a stoplight, and I was like, well, it is in Plaid mode, so let me just give it one. And I don't know if I've ever cursed that many times in such a short amount of time. It was unbelievable.
It's hard to explain. I got lucky because I got my initial reaction on camera. Nice. And it was so insane. And like you said, regular people, when I was a kid, if you went and got like a Lamborghini Diablo, first off, you had to kind of have some skill. Those were not easy cars to drive. It was a heavy clutch. You had to know how to drive a manual. You had to be able to get in and out. And they weren't that fast, right? They were 0 to 60 in 5 seconds or something. Now, like any lawyer can just show up at a Tesla store in the mall, right, and order the fastest car in human history. That's insane. That's the craziest thing.
It is.
Are you fearful of this? You know how fast this thing is. Aren't you scared that there's going to be some crazy accident?
You know what? The last one was super fast too. So like, I'm not more scared about this one. It's just like the ability to do crazy things has always been there. It's just it's so easy this time. Like you mentioned, like there are other older cars where you could go fast, but you had to know how to use it. Where like more so than ever, you just stomp it, and all-wheel drive is just like, now you're going 140. And you're like, what do you mean? That it shouldn't be that easy. So I don't know. I'm glad you got your hands on the car, and I can't wait for that video.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited for the video too. I'm excited to see it go up. It's super desired. And I've never done a Model S video before, because it was by the time I started filming cars, it was kind of old, or and so this is like a big deal for the channel. The Plaid is and it's so insane. It's so insane.
You want to drop any exclusives about the Doug score? You want to give any hints? Any surprises?
I haven't. I don't score them until like the video's being edited. But I can't imagine just sitting here thinking about it. And when I was thinking about it at the time, how is it not the highest Doug score? When you think about the practicality of it. And I mean, it's amazing to me. The world's fastest accelerating car. One of the selling points on Tesla's website is that you can fit a bicycle in the back without taking off the wheel.
I've done two in the back. Yes. Yeah.
Think about that. Like the Ferrari, the LaFerrari, that wasn't one of the things you could do with that car. That wasn't in the list of things. And here we are. Like it's incredible. It's just an amazing feat, to be honest. And there's a lot of people out there, and especially there's a lot of car people out there, and I'm sure you've noticed this, who are anti-Tesla and anti-electric car. And I try to be super objective. And I love gas-powered cars, and I love the old school and the engines and shifting gears, and I have several manual transmission cars. But how do you not?
It seems like
think this is
no, I feel like I know a good amount of car people that I've seen that have a bunch of cars in the garage and daily drive a Tesla. And I always found that fascinating. And to me, it's like the reason I got the car is because I believe it's pretty much the best available daily driver. Like it's a fun performer. It has a ton of space. It's got the tech, like everything about it is great. But it's always interesting to me seeing, people with like 7, 8, 9 cars who daily drive the Tesla. And it's like, that makes a lot of sense.
I think you're right. I think like in terms of an overall car, how do you possibly come up with a better, I like the Taycan too, by the way. And frankly, I may have chosen that before I drove Plaid, but this was like, it was almost like a religious experience.
I was in the same boat.
Pushing that throttle.
Same boat. I reviewed the Taycan. I was like, this is the one I would get if it could supercharge, and I'd take it all back. So now you mentioned.
Yeah. Here's the question. How does it improve from here?
Oh, God.
What are they going to do next?
Well, everyone now is referring to the Roadster because the Roadster is the 2-door, specifically sport-focused version. They can go to the next level. It's a $250,000 car. They can really focus on performance. But like, I have a really hard time picturing a car actually feeling faster than that. So they have to they got to do something else exciting, right? I mean, it's a 2-door, it's a coupe, it's got space, but like.
And the thing about Roadster, I'm sure it'll be cool. I'm sure it'll handle better and like be a real, but the problem is when you start getting into that price point, the accessibility factor is lost, and it almost gets into one of those like, well, it better be whatever because it costs that much. And obviously it's going to be faster than gas powered cars that cost equivalent, but $250 is still an enormous amount of money, and it's not feasible for most people. I think that's one of the coolest things about Plaid. It's not like 140 is cheap. But when you look at what it can do, 140
when it compares to every performance comparison is with a 7-digit car, then you know that it's probably a bit of an outlier there. Yeah. You mentioned so you got it from an owner, but you've dealt with car companies in the past, like review units is what they're sort of referred to in the tech world. Do you have any like review unit horror stories, or is it mostly smooth sailing? Because with cars, it's a little different. I've had cars for a couple days or a week or so, and it's like you have to deal with insurance more, and you have to deal with like what if there's rock chips on the car when you give it back, and how many miles you're allowed to put on it. So it's a little different.
Right. Yeah, they send the press cars. I really, for a very long time, I tried to avoid any press cars because I always felt that if the manufacturer is providing you with something, then, there's a question of objectivity there. And so for years, I wouldn't take press cars, or I would take one every couple months or something. But when COVID happened, my wife and I were trying to get pregnant, and I just didn't want to go to car dealerships, which are like notoriously some of the most conservative, but I didn't want to deal with any of that stuff. So I started getting more press cars coming in, and that started to come in. And so I do that a lot more now, although I still think it's kind of a 50-50 split with owners and press cars. Yeah, the cars come to your house with a full tank of gas and fully washed. And I know some car journalists who don't possess a personal car. And so at that point, you have to wonder, these guys need this to continue, right? Like, are they really being objective? They can't. And meanwhile, these are car people car journalists who don't own a car. I know many of them who don't. And so I always tried to kind of resist that thing. But they show up, and then you have it for a week or whatever, and you provide your impressions. The one big benefit to it, even as questionable as all that sounds, and I still think it's very ethically dubious, having a car for a week, you really do get the chance you drive it at night, you drive it in traffic, you drive it in rain, and you get the chance to really kind of experience it more than me showing up at a guy's house, driving it for an hour, filming it for 4 hours, and then it's not quite the same.
Yeah, that was always my challenge with car videos, is I want to spend more time with them. Like a phone. Like, one of the common questions I get is, how long does it take you once you've gotten the thing to feel like you know it well enough to give your impressions or whatever. Like with headphones, I can spend 3 hours with a pair of headphones and know everything about them. Short of like battery life, I can know everything about a pair of headphones. You give me a smartphone, it's like, okay, I want to go through the battery cycle a few times. Give me like 4, 5, 6 days before I really feel like I know this very well.
Really?
And I think that's pretty short, because in a lot of worlds where you don't know phones as well as someone who's used 1,000 phones, you need more time. But for a car, it's like, I'd want at least a week. I would want a weekend, and I'd want a week where I'm commuting in it and all this sort of stuff. How long?
And then you think about there's 30 car manufacturers, and they're each coming out with 3 new cars a year. And so if you really wanted a week with each one, it's actually not, when you think it's not actually possible, right? And that kind of starts to become a little bit of the challenge.
How long is the longest you've spent with a review car? And how long is the shortest?
The shortest is like when I show up at somebody's house, and I'll usually try to drive it for an hour and film it for 4. And when you're climbing in and out of it and touching everything and whatever, you can get enough of a feel for it that it's enough to make a video and enough that you feel comfortable with the driving experience to an extent. It's like you just said, like if you've done a million of these, you have a generally okay idea, at least when you're getting started. One other big benefit is if I'm reviewing the latest Mercedes-Benz, it generally has a lot of stuff from other, there's not that much stuff. I just shot the new Mercedes S-Class though, and that has a ton of new technology. And so that was like, I was there the whole day trying to get a handle on all that stuff. It takes a little longer. In terms of the longest, like the press cars come for a week. And so that's usually the longest. And depending on the car, I'll drive it for the whole time, or sometimes I'll just only drive it a few times or whatever. It kind of depends on what it is.
I want to go actually back to Tesla real quick, because there's one other thing that I haven't actually ever asked anybody about this, but you'd be the person to ask. So it feels like the number one contradiction of Tesla to me is their number one feature is really, really fun to drive. Crazy acceleration, decent enough handling, like video game type stuff. And then number 2 is autopilot. You won't have to drive these things. How are those the top 2? Like, have you thought about this at all? Like the yoke steering wheel is another thing that comes to mind. Like I'm getting used to the yoke. It's been like 2 weeks for me. And like the answer you get from them is, well, eventually you won't need steering wheels. So we cut off the top half so you can see the autopilot visualization behind the screen. And all of that is technically true, but also you just made a car that goes 0 to 60 faster than anything else ever made. You should have a great steering wheel. You know what I mean? Like how do they reconcile this?
It's an interesting question, but don't you think that their thought is they want the highest tech product, and so to do that, they have to have autopilot and that sort of thing. But they also need it to, like, autopilot alone wouldn't make it desirable enough, right? Like a lot of brands have a similar system now. The car has to also be cool as hell. And in order to do that, then you make it be, and also truthfully for me, like I don't own a Tesla, but it's clearly trending in that direction. And for me, I'm like Mr. Car Guy. I've got 6 cars, whatever. I love nothing more than the concept of sitting in traffic and emailing people while the car drives. And this is kind of sacrilege in the car community saying this, but like I have a bunch of fun cars that I take out on the weekend and really enjoy. When I'm sitting in bumper to bumper traffic, driving from LA to San Diego after filming, I don't want to do that. I got this business to run. I got the channel to manage. I got people I got to reply. I don't want to do that. And so there is something to be said for having a car that does do both, frankly, even though those seem contradictory.
Yeah, it's like I would want it to be really good at both. So the point where it like takes away from one or the other is where it gets confusing to me. Like that's where the yoke steering wheel got so confusing, and like the most fun car to drive that they've ever made is also the most annoying steering wheel.
You find the steering wheel to be annoying? I don't think it's
okay. So the steering wheel itself is not the annoying part. The buttons on the wheel, yes, still very annoying. So
are you? Is turn signals your biggest complaint?
Right now it's the headlights, because they are too far from my thumb to like be resting and get to them, and the horn on the other side.
Yeah.
The blinkers I'm getting used to, but then like still sometimes in my maneuvering of the yoke, I will brush a button or a blinker or like hit the windshield wipers for some reason. And it's kind of embarrassing that happens.
It's not the ideal implementation. You know, it's interesting because Ferrari also has all the stuff as buttons on the wheel, but they implemented it a little bit better especially turn signals. Ferrari has left turn signal on the left side and right turn signal on the right side, which I think is really nice as opposed to having them next to each other, which is a little bit tough. And yeah, the horn thing, like, come on, just put it in the middle. Like, I still think that Tesla does a few things for the sake of being different, which can get a little bit annoying. And then that's kind of
100%. Also, are the Ferraris, is it physical buttons or is it touch buttons?
Ferrari, well, actually, it's an interesting question. They for years and years they were physical buttons, but the two newest Ferraris now have little touch buttons.
Okay.
Like the Teslas.
I'm pretty sure I plan to be testing the, I'm gonna forget the name, the Stradale, the SF90
is the one.
That's one of those.
Yeah, that has moved. That's moved to the touch buttons, and then the Roma, their other new product, they both have those now. And that's been really controversial. Even the engine start-stop button is a touch.
Yeah. That's funny.
And it's crazy in a Ferrari. Like when I was a younger older Ferraris, you twist the key and you hear the motor fire up, and now you get in and you tap a screen. It's the emotion is a little bit lost in this kind of a strange way.
All right, well, thanks for watching, Doug fans. I appreciate you showing out for the clip. If you haven't already subscribed, you definitely should. This is a great channel to get subscribed to.
Oh, yeah.
But also, there's going to be more guests in the future, and maybe you'll like those too. So it's a win-win for everybody. Hit that big red button. See you guys in the next one.